You know what's absolutely perfect? There are cities that spent 2020 to 2020 to bragging about all the tech workers and remote professionals flooding in from California and New York. They made promotional videos. They celebrated being the next Austin or the next Nashville. Local news ran stories about the boom. Real estate agents got rich. And now those same remote workers are quietly packing U-Hauls and leaving because it turns out moving to Boise or Raleigh didn't solve their problems. I'm talking about cities where net migration went from plus 50,000 to minus 10,000. In like 2 years, where for sale signs are everywhere, where rents are actually dropping after tripling during COVID, where the locals who complained about Californians ruining everything are now complaining that those same Californians are leaving and taking their money with them. This is the great remote work reversal. The moment when everyone realized that Zoomtown Paradise was actually just another city with traffic and high costs, except now you don't even have the job that justified moving there because your company called you back to the office. So today we're going through 18 cities where remote workers flooded in and are now leaving because someone needs to document the rise and fall of the work from anywhere dream. Let's get into it. Here's why this is happening and why it's reshaping American cities again. During COVID, remote work became the norm. People working from home realized they didn't need to live in expensive coastal cities. They could move anywhere with good internet and lower costs. The Great Migration began. Sun Belt cities, mountain towns, southern metros, anywhere that was cheaper than San Francisco or New York. These cities exploded with growth. Population surged. Home prices doubled. Rents tripled. Traffic got worse. Infrastructure struggled to keep up. But the migration was based on assumptions that turned out to be wrong. First assumption was remote work was permanent. It wasn't. Companies started return to office mandates. People who moved to Austin while working for a San Francisco company got told to come back or quit. Suddenly that Austin move was a problem. Second assumption was these cities would stay affordable. They didn't. When everyone moves to the cheap city at the same time, it stops being cheap. Boise doubled in cost. Nashville became expensive. The arbitrage disappeared. Third assumption was these cities had everything you needed. They didn't. After the honeymoon phase wore off, people realized they missed their old cities. The food, the culture, the amenities, the dating pool, the professional networks. Fourth assumption was locals would welcome newcomers. They didn't. The culture clash was real. Californians and New Yorkers brought their politics and expectations. Locals resented the transplants. Everyone was unhappy. And fifth, the economy shifted. Tech layoffs, recession fears. People who moved for lifestyle suddenly needed stable jobs again. And those jobs were back in expensive cities, not in the places they moved to. The cities on this list experienced the biggest boom-bust cycles. Massive inflows followed by reversals. Net migration swinging from huge positives to negatives or stagnation. Housing markets correcting. The remote work dream hitting reality. Number 18, Sarasota, Florida, starting with the Florida Gulf Coast city that discovered retirees and remote workers don't mix. Sarasota saw huge inflows during COVID. Young remote workers flooded in. Population growth was significant. Now net migration has slowed dramatically or reversed in some demographics. Home sale volumes are down. Listings are increasing. Sarasota is retirement town, Florida. It's beautiful, but it's built for 70-year-olds, not 30-year-olds. Remote workers realize there's not much to do if you're not golfing or going to early bird dinners. The downside is Sarasota got expensive. Housing costs skyrocketed. Insurance is brutal. Hurricane risk is real. And if you're young, the social scene is limited. People are leaving for cities. With more going on, Sarasota is where remote workers learned they're not ready for retirement town. Living, number 17, Spokane, Washington. The Washington city where people discovered Eastern Washington isn't Seattle. Spokane had significant inflows from Seattle and California. People wanted Washington without Seattle costs. Net migration has slowed significantly. Housing market has cooled. Rents are stabilizing or dropping slightly. Spokane is affordable Washington. Mountains, outdoor recreation. But it's Eastern Washington, which is very different from Western Washington culturally and politically. The problem is Spokane is isolated. It's conservative. The weather is harsh. And after the novelty wore off, people missed actual cities. They're moving back to Seattle or leaving Washington entirely. Spokane is where the Washington state brand didn't match Eastern Washington reality. Number 16. Greenville, South Carolina, the South Carolina city where Southern charm met Northern exhaustion. Greenville saw huge growth from Northeast transplants. Charming downtown, growing economy. Net migration has reversed or stagnated. Housing market activity is down significantly from peak. Greenville is nice for South Carolina. Downtown is walkable. Food scene exists, but it's still small, still conservative, still the South. The downside is Greenville is limited. After you've walked downtown and hiked nearby mountains a few times, what else is there? People realized they traded real cities for a nice small city and weren't satisfied. They're leaving. Greenville is where Southern hospitality couldn't keep. Yankees from going back north. Number 15. Provo, Utah. The Utah Valley where BYU and Tech didn't mix with transplants. Provo area had growth from California and other states, tech workers, students. Net migration has slowed dramatically. Housing market cooling significantly. Provo is Utah County. Conservative, Mormon-dominated culture. Beautiful mountains, but culturally very specific. The problem is if you're not Mormon and not into that lifestyle, Provo is alienating. The culture clash was real. Transplants who moved for cheap mountain living left when they realized they didn't fit. Provo is where religious cultural dominance made secular remote workers uncomfortable. Number 14. Charleston, South Carolina, the historic southern city where everyone moved and regretted it. Charleston had massive inflows, beautiful, historic beaches. Net migration has reversed significantly. Housing market is correcting. Prices down 10 to 15% in some areas. Days on market way up. Charleston is gorgeous, but it's also expensive now. Flooded regularly. Hurricane risk. Summer heat is oppressive, and the infrastructure can't handle the growth. The downside is Charleston stopped being the charming, affordable southern city. It became an expensive city with southern problems. Flooding. Traffic. High costs. People are leaving for actually affordable places or going back to cities with better infrastructure. Charleston is where antebellum charm became modern dysfunction. Number 13. Denver, Colorado, the mountain city where everyone's mountain dream died. Denver had huge growth during COVID. California exodus destination. Net migration has slowed to nearly zero or negative in some periods. Housing market has cooled significantly. Denver was the perfect city. Mountains, culture, jobs, outdoor recreation, except it got crowded and expensive and the locals started hating transplants. The problem is Denver is now expensive without being better than the city's people left. Traffic is bad. Homelessness is visible. Politics are dysfunctional. The mountains are crowded. People realize they paid almost California prices for not California. Denver is where the Rocky Mountain High became the Rocky Mountain. Why did I move here? Number 12. Phoenix, Arizona. The desert city where heat and water made people reconsider. Phoenix had significant growth. Remote workers, retirees. California exodus. Net migration has slowed dramatically. Some periods showing reversals. Housing market cooling significantly. Phoenix is cheap and sunny until you experience summer. 115 degrees for weeks. Electric bills of $1,000 a month. Water shortages looming. The downside is Phoenix is fundamentally inhospitable to human life without massive resource consumption. People move for cheap desert living and realize the environmental costs are real. They're leaving before climate makes it unlivable. Phoenix is where cheap sunshine came with existential heat. Number 11. Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, the Research Triangle, where everyone thought they found perfect balance. Raleigh-Durham had massive inflows, tech, remote workers, northeastern transplants. Net migration has slowed significantly. Housing market correcting. Rent growth reversed. Raleigh-Durham is nice. Good jobs, universities, growing. But it's still North Carolina, still the South, still has limitations. The problem is Raleigh isn't a real city and isn't affordable anymore either. You're paying city prices for a sprawling metro that lacks urban density and culture. People realize the trade-off wasn't worth it. They're going back to real cities or moving to actually cheap places. Raleigh-Durham is where the perfect balance turned out to be mediocre at everything. Number 10. Portland, Oregon, the city where Weird died and remote workers noticed. Portland had some COVID inflows despite problems. People thought they could escape California to quirky Portland. Net migration has reversed hard. Significant outflows. Housing market declining. Portland is a disaster. Downtown is dystopian. Homelessness, crime, dysfunction. The quirky city that attracted people is gone. The downside is Portland destroyed its own appeal. The remote workers who moved there during COVID looked around, saw the tent cities and boarded up businesses, and left. They're going back to California or moving to functional cities. Portland is where keeping it weird became keeping it unlivable. Number 9. Salt Lake City, Utah, the Utah capital, where Mormon culture met diverse transplants poorly. Salt Lake had significant growth. California exodus. Outdoor recreation seekers. Net migration reversing. Housing market cooling. Rent prices declining slightly. Salt Lake is beautiful. Skiing. Mountains. Growing economy. But it's Utah. The culture is Mormon-dominated. The politics are conservative. The air quality is terrible in winter. The problem is cultural fit. If you're not outdoorsy and not Mormon, Salt Lake is isolating. The transplants who moved for mountains and cheap living are leaving when they realize the cultural limitations. Back to diverse cities or other mountain towns. Salt Lake is where powder snow couldn't overcome cultural snow. Number 8. Miami, Florida, the Florida city where everyone moved and nobody could afford it. Miami exploded during COVID. Finance brothers. Tech workers. New York exodus. Net migration has slowed significantly. Some reversal. Housing market cooling. Rent prices actually dropping in some areas. Miami is sexy beaches. Nightlife. No state income tax. But it's expensive now. Hurricane risk. Insurance is insane. Traffic is terrible. And it's Florida. The downside is Miami became as expensive as New York without being New York. People moved for the tax arbitrage and lifestyle, then realized they were paying New York rents and Florida humidity with hurricane threats. They're leaving. Miami is where tax savings couldn't overcome everything else. Number 7. Seattle, Washington, the Pacific Northwest city losing people despite tech money. Seattle had some inflows, but also massive outflows. Net migration negative. People leaving for cheaper Washington towns or leaving the state entirely. Housing market cooling. Seattle has tech money, but also dysfunction. Homelessness, crime. High cost. Rain. Remote workers came during COVID and lasted one winter before deciding to leave. The problem is Seattle is expensive and depressing. The rain is real. The gray is oppressive. The homeless crisis is visible. Tech workers who thought they could do remote work in Seattle left for sunshine states. Seattle is where tech salaries couldn't overcome 9 months of gray. Number 6. Tampa St. Petersburg, Florida, the Florida metro where the boom became too much. Tampa Bay had explosive growth. Everyone moved there. Net migration reversing. Housing market cooling significantly. Insurance crisis making people reconsider. Tampa is functional Florida. Jobs. Beaches. Culture. But it got crowded and expensive fast. And the hurricane risk plus insurance costs are breaking people. The downside is Tampa went from affordable Florida to expensive Florida overnight. When your homeowner's insurance is $15,000 a year and your rent doubled, the value proposition disappears. People are leaving for cheaper states or going back to where they came from. Tampa is where Florida dream became Florida insurance nightmare. Number 5. Las Vegas, Nevada, the desert city where cheap gambling came with expensive living. Vegas had significant growth. California exodus. Remote workers. Net migration slowing dramatically. Housing market cooling. Rent prices stabilizing or dropping. Vegas is Nevada without state income tax. Entertainment. Warm winters. But it's also 115 degrees in summer, has water shortages, and is fundamentally a tourist trap to live in. The problem is Vegas got expensive, and the novelty of living there wears off fast. Unless you're a gambler or service industry worker, there's not much for you. Remote workers came for tax savings and left when they realized they were living in a desert theme park. Vegas is where what happens in Vegas was people leaving Vegas. Number 4. Nashville, Tennessee, the Tennessee city where everyone thought they found the next Austin. Nashville exploded, California exodus, New York finance moving in, music industry, remote workers. Net migration has slowed dramatically or reversed, housing market cooling significantly, rent growth negative. Nashville is fun, music, food, growing, but it became a victim of its own success. Traffic is terrible now, costs skyrocketed, the charm that attracted people got buried. Undergrowth. The downside is Nashville marketed itself as affordable Austin with better culture. Then it became expensive with Austin-level traffic and worse urban planning. People realized they paid premium prices for a still-developing city. They're leaving. Nashville is where honky-tonk dreams became traffic jam reality. Number 3. Boise, Idaho, the Idaho city that went from unknown to overrun to abandoned. Boise had the most extreme boom. California exodus central. Net migration was insane. Now it's reversed hard. Negative migration. Housing prices dropping 10 to 20%. Massive outflows. Boise was the poster child for remote work migration. Affordable. Mountain access. Clean. Safe. And then everyone moved there at once. Prices doubled. It became expensive. Infrastructure failed. The problem is Boise is still small. It doesn't have the job market to absorb everyone who moved there. When return to office happened or people got laid off, they couldn't find work in Boise. They had to leave. Plus, locals absolutely hated the Californians. The culture clash was brutal. Boise is where the American dream of escaping California became the nightmare of overpaying in Idaho. Number 2. Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, the Texas mega region where everyone moved and immediately regretted it. DFW had massive inflows. California. New York, everyone. Corporate relocations. Net migration slowing significantly. Some reversal. Housing market cooling despite continued growth. DFW is sprawl. Jobs. No state income tax. But it's also car-dependent hell. Summer heat is brutal. There's no walkability. The culture is Texas, which isn't for everyone. The downside is people move for tax savings and affordability. Then discovered DFW is a 100-degree sprawling parking lot with tornado risk. The property taxes are brutal. The electric bills are insane in summer. People are leaving for other states or going back to cities with actual urban fabric. Dallas is where no income tax couldn't overcome urban planning hell. Number 1. Austin, Texas at number 1. The city that became everything it promised not to be. Austin had the most explosive growth of anywhere. Tech, California exodus, remote workers, everyone. Net migration has reversed, significant outflows. Housing market correcting hard. Rent prices down 10 to 15% in some areas. Austin sold itself as weird, affordable, creative, liberal Texas, and then it became expensive, crowded, lost its culture. Traffic is among worst in America. Homeless crisis visible. The weird died. The problem is Austin became exactly what people were escaping. It's expensive like California, but without California's benefits. It's crowded. Infrastructure is failing. The music scene is dying because musicians can't afford rent. Tesla and Oracle moved headquarters there, which brought traditional corporate culture. Remote workers came for weird Austin and found expensive Dallas with a lake. They're leaving in droves, going back to California, moving to cheaper Texas cities, or trying the next Austin before that dies too. The irony is Austin killed itself by succeeding. It attracted so many people that it destroyed what made it attractive. The weirdness is gone. The affordability is gone. What's left is an expensive Sunbelt city with Texas politics and California problems. Austin is where keeping it weird became losing it all. So what does all this mean? First, the remote work migration was based on temporary conditions and faulty assumptions. People thought they could move anywhere and keep their jobs and costs would stay low. Wrong on both counts. Second, cities can't absorb that much growth that fast. When everyone moves somewhere at once, infrastructure breaks and costs explode. The thing you moved for disappears. Third, return to office killed the dream. Companies force people back. All those people who moved to Austin or Nashville while working remotely for coastal companies had to choose between their jobs and their new cities. Many chose jobs. Fourth, nowhere is immune to the boom-bust cycle. Even the hottest cities can reverse when conditions change. Net migration can swing from huge positive to negative in months. And fifth, there's no free lunch. You can't escape high costs without trade-offs. And when everyone tries to escape to the same places, you recreate the problems you tried to escape. So there you have it. 18 cities where remote workers flooded in and are now leaving. This isn't about hating these cities or the people who moved there. This is about documenting a massive economic and demographic shift that's now reversing. For the people who moved during COVID, the decision looks different now. Some are stuck in expensive cities they don't like. Some lost their remote jobs. Some are choosing to go back to expensive cities because at least those cities have the jobs and culture they want. For the cities themselves, this is whiplash. They absorbed massive growth, invested in infrastructure, celebrated the boom, and now they're watching people leave and wondering if the growth was sustainable. The remote work revolution promised we could live anywhere. The reality is we can live anywhere with internet, but we might not want to. And if our employers call us back, the anywhere option disappears. The great remote work migration is reversing. Not everywhere, not completely, but in the cities that boomed hardest, the exodus is real. So here's my question for you. If you moved during COVID for remote work, are you staying or planning to leave? And if you're still remote, what would make you reconsider your location? Let me know in the comments, because this reversal is reshaping American migration again. And if you enjoyed watching the remote work dream die in real time, maybe subscribe. We cover housing markets, migration patterns, and the death of impossible promises. Someone has to document the great remote work reversal. Might as well be me.